Buying as a couple, ever found yourself disagreeing on what and where you should be looking? Ever thought your partner was totally on the same page as you, only to be shocked and surprised when they objected something you thought you'd both agreed to? That's what we're dealing with today.
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for home buyers who want to get it right.
I'm Meighan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. And that's a good thing because between us, we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories and avoidable mistakes. Together, we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on.
We've got loads of free tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au. There you'll get access to our free webinar, How to Buy Your First Home with the Right Amount of Debt. You'll also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to be educated home buyers. We have created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, here's the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority or your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Today we're talking about the road to marital bliss for first home buyers. Well, we're not exactly, but anyway, before we get stuck into today's topic, what is your special house this week, Meighan? It's been a while since you've had a special house.
Been a little while. Let me show you what I have here. It is not my idea of your ideal first home, but this is called The Cube, spelt K-Y-O-O-B. This is a course on Airbnb's OMG section. It's at Shashdeen, I think it's pronounced, in Arizona. Now, it's described as an extraordinarily well-appointed, architecturally stunning structure set in the Navajo land. Now, I feel like it's a box, but I think there's more to it because this is an eco-friendly resort. And when I did a little bit of research, it is at about 4.9 stars across the board. So as a location, apparently it's quite amazing. Now, some first-time buyers might feel that this is all you can afford at the moment in the back sticks of Australia.
A box in the desert.
But, you know, have faith. I'm sure if you set your path and do all the right things, follow the right steps, you may end up with something more than a cube.
More than a cube with no tree, in a treeless landscape. All right. Well, we know that buying a home is hard at the best of times. It's especially difficult when you're buying property as a couple. And there's always a challenge when two people need to come to an agreement on anything, really, but even more so if each of you have a different list of priorities. So what we want to talk about is the best way to get on the same page as your partner. I think
now, firstly, you need to know you're not alone. Right?
You're not on your own.
All the time. In fact, in our buyer's agency, and I'm fairly sure I've heard you say this around yours as well, Veronica, with Good Deeds, we say that we are counsellors of our clients and coaches of agents. So what we mean by that is often we have to let the clients, our buyers, work through some of the things that they didn't even know they disagreed on until they're forced to make a decision about it.
Yep. And in fact, I often think of it as when you first start off and you're really full of positive ideas and you write your wish list and it's like a Venn diagram. You know, you got two circles and they overlap and mostly they overlap.
Well, you have 370 even I've seen.
Oh, God.
Nice to haves on your list.
Oh, my God. They probably, yes, I don't know what I'd do if somebody came to you with a wish list like that. Yes. You can have that one, nothing else. But, you know, I think about it as like a Venn diagram and where you've got a huge overlapping center. That's what most briefs start out like. But as you look for property, the longer you look for property and the more disheartened you get, the more yellow boxes in the middle of Arizona you keep looking at thinking, we're never going to be able to afford what we want. It's almost like couples start drifting apart, and that center part, which is overlapping, becomes smaller and smaller, and the focus becomes more on the things that are different. And often it's like in families in particular, certainly in my business, we see it a lot with families, and particularly in a more sort of traditional situation where one is in the breadwinner role and one's a homemaker. And that will happen when the kids are particularly little. Often there's a time where one of them, and it's not always the woman's at home, but often it is, there's often a time of readjustment and can take years where each one struggles to reconcile the workload balance with the loss of independence, heavy responsibility, attempts to value both financial and non-financial input, those sorts of things.
And this can happen even before children arrive.
Yes, it can. And also because you can have different money personalities or money mindsets as well.
Absolutely. Gosh, how many times do we see that? And the coupling up of the saver versus the spender, and the anxiety and disagreements that can cause within a relationship.
Yeah. So these roles that you play, but also those mindsets, and their relative perspectives, of course, they can magnify any differences when the time comes to buy a home. And so all of a sudden it becomes not so much fun buying with your partner. Like it
feels like you're butting heads. But I thought you liked this. Well, I thought you liked this. But you never told me that you didn't like that. I didn't know that I didn't like that. It's not an uncommon conversation for people to have, Veronica, because what looks really good on the internet. So when you're sitting there and you're looking through things, oh, I really like that. Oh, I really like that too. Oh, I could really see us having a family. Oh, I could see us having a family here too. Yep. You'll be such a great mum. I feel like Michael McIntyre. That's one of his really great skits. But it does. It feels like that mountain that you're climbing to purchase that first time. It starts feeling a little bit like Mount Everest, because not only is it about trying to find a property, it's actually trying to find the common ground and stick to the common ground as well, but also allow each other to have conversations about what the non-common ground is and how you feel about what's okay and what's not okay. It's sometimes people start down, that wish list, they write things down, and one person says, oh, I'd really like this, this and this, and I'd really like a shed and somewhere that I can tinker. Well, you've never tinkered in your life. Why do you need to tinker? I want to be able to tinker. I want to get some tools and I want to tinker.
What's wrong with tinkering?
So when are you going to have time to tinker? You're at work all the time. You're never home.
I know, because I have to pay for the mortgage you want me to have. Thanks. You can hear it. I'm sure you're probably relating to this.
This is all really common stuff. And it's when you're put under a little bit of pressure as well, and people find it in the lead up to marriage. So marriage is one of those key milestones that differences start to come to the surface, things that you haven't really thought to talk about before. Buying a home is really similar. Whether you're doing that before marriage or after marriage, it starts conversations that start getting really real quickly. And so having a way to deal with that, of course, is what we want to work with people through today.
Yeah. And what it becomes quite difficult too is if one is more active in the whole property equation and the other one is more passive, right? And so we often find that with people who do the course. We certainly find that with our buyer's agents clients. Yep. There's one that's more engaged, seems to want it more than the other. And they're like dragging their partner along. And if it's, if it's the person who's the homemaker, right? He or her, doesn't actually matter who it is, but sometimes the person who's driving this is the one that's at home more because, of course, it's a constant reminder, I need more space and I've got a bit more time or whatever. Or I'm local and it's easier for me to go out there and actually have a look at homes in the area.
Well, I just like it, Veronica. There are people who are just real estate tragics, and that's okay. Like, good on you, so am I. But not everyone is.
No, not everyone is at all.
That natural affinity and desire to go and look and explore and talk and be real estate oriented isn't a natural position for every person to be in. And so that can cause a little bit of conflict too.
Absolutely. And also because, of course, the one that is actually out there pounding the pavement, getting to know the agent, starting to track what properties are selling for and seeing, oh, I don't really like that one. And do you like that one? Oh, dear. Or prices are rising. Oh, dear. All that sort of stuff. They start to get a little bit sense of urgency, right? They go back and they talk to their other half and they're like, we need to get active because we're going to get left behind, or now I'm really agitated. I want to do it now. I'm really motivated. And so, you know, they might be the driving force to get to the broker, you know, get the pre-approval, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it can, you know, back to that money mindset, that can be when it becomes really confronting.
Yeah.
If one is more fearful than the other.
Yeah.
That debt.
And more, so there's the debt side of things, there's a motivation side of things. You know, sometimes in couples, it's that feeling of, oh, I don't know if we're ready yet, or you know, one's really like, I work from home and I really need more space. When you come home, like it's like you're on top of me, like there's a human being in my entire space. Or when the kids come in, or when, you know, when their friends rock up, or we haven't got anywhere to entertain, we can't have people over because. So that motivation is not always about the couple. It's actually about the external factors that influence the couple as well. So when one is in the space a little bit more than the other, that sense of urgency can be quite heightened, and their needs are really different from the person who might go out to work and come back. You know, FIFO relationships are a really challenging one because one is more located in the house and one is really not located in the house. And very, very little time when they come back. So that's a really challenging situation to navigate as well.
Yeah. And I think recognizing, like we said at the head of this, you know, you're not alone. Yeah. This happens a lot. But recognizing that really this is part of the process effectively, you know, because then you're sort of thinking, okay, well, I don't like that amount of debt, and no one does.
Yeah.
Just so you know, you're not alone on that one.
No one goes, I can't wait to have a mortgage.
I can't wait to have
it's not. No,
30 years worth of debt.
I'll be working until I'm 85.
But we do love have a home. Like we do love to have a home. And so then the next thing is, okay, well then we'll do it, whatever. If one gets dragged kicking and screaming, then you have to go through the process of, it gets away from the fun of the wish list and to the drudgery of working out what to compromise on. Because you have to. It's the ugly C word when it comes to buying property. It's working out the compromises. And
everybody does. You know, we talked about it in so many situations, Veronica. I'd love to live on Hedges Avenue, right on the beach. My compromise is I can't.
Yeah.
One, I don't have the money, and two, it doesn't work for my family.
That's true. But the problem is that sometimes with compromises is that the one that's more active in the search and has much more of an understanding about what they can get for their money, they're usually, I guess, more willing to compromise. And because they'll sort of know whether it's the property itself or the position, they'll sort of know what's really important to them. And the other half may not be as far down the track. And that makes it really difficult as well, because that's sort of when the trouble begins, is where one person starts compromising more because they know, they get it, right?
Yeah.
And the other person doesn't seem to be compromising at all. And they see that that's the person digging their heels in, that if they don't compromise, we're never going to buy anything. And that's sort of where the trouble begins.
And it can be a really tough one because it is genuinely a journey and a process to buy a property. And you need to gather knowledge along the way. And what is, you know, very common in relationships is your partner may share something with you in an attempt to influence you. And often you put up a little bit of a barrier or a wall to say, well, I don't have evidence of that. What are you saying? And it's almost like you need an external validation of what has been uncovered and revealed by your partner in their own process and journey. So when you're on different not so much different pathways, you know, the end point is often the same, but the pathway to get there, if you're not on the same pathway of learning and acquiring knowledge and understanding, where, you know, particularly, you know, people who grew up in an area, moved away, come back, the amount of people who say, I would never live in that suburb, it's terrible, but it's changed so much since they last lived there. and their experience and knowledge of it is a little bit out of date, but perhaps the partner that's been doing a lot of the on-the-ground work has come to learn that there's lots of people like you there, and it could be a really quite interesting place to live. So that background knowledge or that history can often be an impediment to the process of moving forward if you haven't actually had your feet on the ground and doing that work yourself. This, again, is not uncommon. It's very, very common in 20 years of buyer's agency. There are not many couples who come to me, even if they've bought 2, 3, 4 properties before, they still need to end up on the same page through a process.
Exactly. In fact, I wrote an article on this after interviewing a whole bunch of our clients some years ago, and I'll put the link in the show notes because, particularly in these cases, the women in these cases were trying to get help because they were just pulling their hair out, and then the men were kicking and screaming into our offices. And the amount of times you'd sit there with a couple and be looking at each other, like throwing daggers at each other through their eyes because they're so annoyed with each other. This is something they're sick of talking about, right? And one of them will say something and the other one will just like put their hands on the table and go, don't even know what you're talking about. And it's like, and it's obvious to me as
this plays out day after day
as a professional, and you go, you're right, he or she doesn't, but neither do you. And here we are, we've got you here because you need help, right? So now we're going to sort of talk you through some of the things that we would do to help them, but and also to reassure you that, as I said, this is normal. It's part of the process. So if you can embrace it and then move through it, then you will get to where you want to be.
Almost like a little bit of marriage counselling without being marriage counselling, because we're not marriage counsellors.
No.
But if you learn ways to deal with conflict, and this is conflict in a way, if you learn ways to deal with conflict and move through things, then it gives you life skills in future conflict situations, and almost knowing, okay, we're going to have a difference of opinion here. How do we work through? It's not, marriage isn't about winning. It's not about losing. It's not about getting the upper hand. It's kind of working out where you both want to be as a partnership. And that's the property search.
So it's, if you remember back to my idea about the Venn diagram and basically the circles get further and further apart and you've got a tiny little sliver in the middle that is common ground, the focus has to be the common ground and expanding that again, getting those circles to come back in again. And often it's because, it's about looking at common goals and common objectives and really what you want as a family or as a couple in terms of your life. But quite often before this happens, before people get into my office or Meighan's office, it's one of them's still out there looking and the other one's sort of not as engaged. And when they start to see properties that they like selling outside of their price range and they're thinking, oh my God, we have to move suburbs, and it becomes even more fraught because at that point, the very fact that they're not both working as a team becomes even more stressful because it's like, now I'm doing it all on my own and I'm the only one seeing the truth.
It's hard to verbalise what that truth is sometimes, particularly if you're trying to take someone on a journey that you don't necessarily intrinsically understand yourself or have done the research. So you can see things anecdotally but not understand why they're happening, and therefore it's hard to communicate that to your partner if you can see a pattern but you can't really explain what's behind it or what's driving it and help them see, I know we said we wanted to live in this suburb, but I've looked at every house in this suburb. There's nothing in our price range that we can afford except this. Well, I'm not going to buy that.
Yeah. No. Or they find something in the next suburb and it's like the one, right? It's going to go to auction, right? And it looks like it's all going to be within budget. It's all systems go. And then, right, time to get through and have a look. And it's like, no way, that's overpriced. I'm not paying that. Because, both people need to have a full understanding about what the market's costing, what the prices
other buyers are paying for things. Really, that's what the market is. What are other buyers paying for things?
That's exactly right. So you definitely, you don't want that. You've got to be joking. And then the house sells for what, she or he, the one that dragged the other one, knows it will go through. And you're back to square one. It's really, really demoralizing because the reality is, though, there are some little gems in here because one of you is getting educated about the market, right? And so if the other one is actually behind, recognize that and started to actually listen to the person who's doing the hard work rather than acting out of fear and being worried that they're basically going to have to work to the 85 to pay for the mortgage, then that's moving back to the Venn diagram and the common area. You know what I mean?
Reconnecting the partnership as well. One person doesn't want to be the Lone Ranger doing all the work and being, having that shocked response when they just reveal what they've learned along the way. And that's really what it is. You're picking up knowledge and learning things along the way, sharing it, and then having a conversation about how does that impact you.
A lot of the people that become our clients sort of start with one dragging their partner across the line. And I know a lot of our students are a little bit that way too. One is the more analytical one is the more of the researcher, and they're the ones entrusted with the responsibility of learning all this stuff. And then they've got to try and impart that knowledge to their partner, who hasn't invested all the time and energy getting to that same place. So that can be quite difficult. Of course, we do have some couples that do the course together, and obviously that is ideal, but it's not.
It's a different process, don't you find?
It is, but even then they're going to have disagreements sometimes,
totally,
right?
Totally. But they're coming from a place of common knowledge.
Yeah.
So the disagreements aren't so much about, well, what do you know versus what do I know, and what are you trying to tell me, and I know more than you. It's actually they're on the same page from a knowledge-based point of view.
Yeah.
It's then actually about the individual differences in their preferences and how they see their lifestyle and how they see themselves living in the house. And they're good conversations to have when you take away the differences in understanding of the process.
Absolutely. So, you know what? Sometimes, as I mentioned, sometimes people can afford to get a buyer's agent, and we're like an umpire in many ways. We call it, a bit of property therapy. We're like a mediator.
Some hard conversations along the way.
Some hard conversations. And in fact, I actually had clients that said to me, "You are like the threesome that's good for our marriage." How's that? That is
okay.
the best line. In fact, that's one of those quotes I need to sort of put on an Insta tile. I think
great.
Threesome that's good for our marriage. And so
anyway, that is, of course, for a lot of people further down the track, we're very much talking about arming yourself with the ability to do this yourself.
Yes. So what do you do if you can't afford a buyer's agent to become a mediator? and you know what? A lot of people that can afford one, they still, the one partner who wants a buyer's agent can't convince the other. We've even had some people who can't convince their partner to let them shell $990 out to do this course. So you can imagine that partner would never let them go and use a buyer's agent. So that makes it especially hard because when you've got one person who's resisting learning, resisting the knowledge, resisting getting any outside expert help, that does make it difficult. And I'm not sure what I can do to help you with that one. But if you were to do the course, you can always both come to Campfire, and we actually act as mediators on a Wednesday lunchtime.
We did. We had that recently at Campfire. Actually, we had a challenge that we did tackle at Campfire, and it was actually quite joyful to watch the progress from that 1 hour that we spent. And we don't just focus on one person during Campfire. There's a number of people in there tabling another number of different things about properties or process or questions about negotiations or auctions. So it does move around. But the difference that I think we saw in that couple going from, they were really frustrated, incredibly frustrated with each other, with the market, with mortgages, with lack of clarity about, they were just really like this, and their body language was so tense, and the sidewards glances were really, it's sort of like, we need to have a conversation here, because I think what we're seeing is actually a positive thing. Because when you get to the point of acknowledging that we feel like we're on different pages here, that's a great opportunity to go, right, well, let's step back and see where the common space is, where the differences are, and how do we get you on the same page.
What was a classic with that one is that they've been joining us for Campfire for a few weeks, and in that process, they were still in the pre-approval process, and they'd done the where to buy tutorial. And they'd done the full course as well, but in particular, they've done the where to buy tutorial, and that helped them to go out there and look at other areas because they felt that they were going to be outpriced from the area that they're currently living in that they would ideally like to stay in, but they felt that they were going to be not able to afford what they want in that area. So that's when they started looking at areas sort of another half of an hour away. And so they come to a conclusion. They found this sort of area that they really liked and they agreed on this area.
Yeah.
But when it came through that they got their pre-approval, they actually got a bit more money than they expected. And that sort of changed things a bit. And I think one of them was quite happy to stick where they were.
Yeah.
And the other one went, oh, we can go now and look where we originally wanted to look. And I think that's where the conflict came, didn't it?
Yeah, it's just because one was ready to buy a house that they'd seen that they thought was outside their budget in the new area that they'd gone to when they had the lower budget.
And the other one was thinking, why aren't we making an offer on the one in the newer area, which was cheaper? So all of a sudden there's this difference and we're like, this is good, guys.
Yeah.
Let's get this out. So,
well, because it means they're getting closer to their goal.
Yes.
Right. When you're really
real.
pushed, it gets real. And that's what we sort of said to them. It's good news. You're getting closer to your goal. It means you switched from we are going to look at buying a house to we are home buyers. Like it's a real shift in your mindset when you move in that space. And when it starts to get real, you need to have some very different conversations than the, won't it be lovely when I'm looking forward to we are doing this.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
It's normal to have a little bit of fear kick in at that point.
Yeah.
But it's also because you're no longer in the researching phase, like you're in the real phase. But it's also precisely why in our process, we've got 10 steps in the process to buy a home. Step 5 is revise and correct. And it just reiterated how important this step is in the proper process that you need to go through to buy a home. Because step 1 is getting your support crew. So that's fine, right? Step 2 is getting the money sorted out, which they did. Step 3 is getting the plan organised. Now it's starting to take shape because we know what the budget is. We know what our requirements are. We do the where to buy workshop, all that sort of stuff. And then step 4 is getting out there and searching and inspecting. That's when you actually started to physically look at what you potentially can afford to buy. And that's sort of before the pre-approval. And then when the pre-approval land, it's like, right, we may have to make sure we're on the right path. All the assumptions we use to make the plan thus far, let's test them. Are they still applicable? Do they still hold forth? And the budget was the one that didn't. And so then that causes a rethink of the other 2 aspects, which is the property and the position. And so in order to make the best possible decision, rethinking that, revising and correcting is so important. Otherwise, you just go down a path and you go, well, I'm going down that path because we decided it when circumstances were a little bit different to what they are now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only after the stress of it all is, the cloud is gone, the stress is alleviated, and you sit back and you go, oh, we could have actually done it differently. And we don't want you doing that at the end of this road. We want you doing it in the middle of the road. Or
throwing up your hands and saying, I'm not doing this anymore because it's too hard. Yes, it's hard. It is hard. And the more effort you put in, the more time you put in, the more you educate yourself, the more in control of the decision you are. It is still hard.
Absolutely.
Because it's a lot of money, there's a lot of emotion, and it's a long period of time. And that's okay. It's all right. Just sit in it, accept it.
As of today, they haven't yet bought, but I think they're putting in an offer.
They are.
And they have also been very serious on 3 other properties that they haven't gone ahead of board, obviously, but they kicked into such a different gear and they are just so close to becoming homeowners. It's ridiculous, right?
But I also find, Veronica, in Campfire, their interaction with each other is really different. They're actually having conversations now about the pros and cons without it being, but like they're
really on the same page.
Has changed. Yeah.
It's really exciting actually. It's from both sides. I think it's been movement from both sides on that. So, and they're really in alignment as to what they want and what they're working towards. It's really exciting. So I cannot wait until they've bought. So we'll be throwing our hands up in the air with excitement over that one.
We will.
One of the things though, that I really noticed, and I noticed this with clients sometimes, but I particularly noticed this when I was filming the show, location, and relocation. Because in the show, people were our inverted commas clients, but they're not true clients. They're there. We're there with them for a very short period of time. We're doing our best to find them the right property and infotainment, yes, as opposed to the way we work with our clients, which is much more intimate, really. And, really, intimate is probably the best word. What I saw in the show is probably what happens a lot out there where people don't have any guidance. They don't have our campfire every week, or they just don't have a buyer's agent, right? And that is where one partner becomes a saboteur. So where the danger is particularly when you've got a couple and one is very vocal and one seems to get their own way a lot, or one seems to vocalize what they want a lot more, and the other one doesn't feel heard. And if they don't have a very healthy relationship, that person can become a white ant, can become a saboteur. And I've seen it happen. As I said, we used to see it a lot on the show because we are close to this the dynamic without actually having the intimate relationship we would have with the client. And that's a danger that you have to be aware of, and particularly if one is steamrolling and one is really is the more dominant, and if you're getting frustrated with the person who's dragging the chain in particular, that's what you got to be looking for. You got to making sure that either you're not being the saboteur or your partner's not being a saboteur, because it's quite a dangerous place to be in if you're trying to buy a home.
Remember, I've also had situations where one has been quite laid back. So one being the driver and excited and, moving things forward, and the other one being quite laid back and, yeah, that sounds really good. But then suddenly it's not okay. And the ability for those people to actually talk to each other in a constructive way is difficult, because this person who's laid back has never actually expressed such a strong opinion before. So it can be, even someone who seems laid back and going with the flow and really comfortable with everything, if they feel like they're not being heard along the way or haven't got an opinion or an input, it's really important to check in on that, because the last thing you want is someone going, yeah, it's fine, I don't really like it though, after you've spent a couple of $100,000 on a house.
And I've met people who have done that. I've met people who have gone along with it and then basically made their partner suffer. Well, you bought it. Yeah, you bought it. It's what you wanted. Yeah. It's like this. It's a really horrible. Get out of that relationship before you buy a house with them. Just this really is marriage counselling, isn't it?
Not giving you marriage advice here, but
having a think about relationship. Or go and see a counsellor. Get that sorted out before you buy a house. But it does happen, and so just be aware of it. Just human.
Because this is not something you're going to do all the time. It's a very intense, emotional roller coaster that you go on in the process leading up to thinking about preparing to going through the process of buying the house, and often having the remorse that comes afterwards until you settle yourself down. Very common to get buyer's remorse. We should do an episode about that. And the potential to go, well, you wanted it, so that's why we did it. So almost even going past the point of the purchase and feeling comfortable about the purchase before the purchase could be a really good thing to go through too. And there's ways, there are ways for people to get external input. It can be parents, if you've got parents who are quite level-headed, although that can be difficult because if one's
maybe
the
not
daughter and there's the son-in-law who's favoured, sometimes the son-in-law is going to get the favour too. Yeah.
You always take his side.
It could go either way there. Yeah, you never support me. But an external person who isn't emotionally invested can be good. If you can afford a buyer's agent, that is a really good part of the process. People undervalue how important that emotional part is. But of course, if you're saving every dollar towards your deposit and you are looking to do this yourself, then getting yourself educated and having the access to us as external mentors once a week can be invaluable.
Absolutely. And look, as a quick note, this course, I think I say this at the end of every episode, it's only $990. Honestly, divorce costs a lot more than that, right? And you get access to us, direct access to us, as we mentioned in our weekly campfires, that help guide you through these conversations to help you, work out what the right path is for you. We're not going to here to tell you what the right path is. It's a discovery for each of you, but there is a process of discovery that we can lead you through, because we've done it time and time again. And you know what? Trust me, as I said, a divorce is a lot more expensive than $990. So is a poor negotiation.
And Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And you don't want to end up walking away from a good relationship because you had a poor property purchase process. In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out your first home buyer guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us. And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you've found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.